agreeing to with your staff. So what we would ask is that we simply add that 35A be changed to the upgrades to the Waterford wastewater treatment plant are under construction. Once it's under construction, fair enough, remove your holding provision and away we go. Two more. Condition 39 talks about source water protection, and it says that we're to have a warning clause to every single person who buys a house in this subdivision about source water protection. Well, there's hardly any of this subdivision in the source water protection area, and this condition should only apply to 3 or 4 lots. There is the map that Matt sent me this afternoon of the source water protection area. This is our subdivision right here. This little tiny area down here, which I think might only be the stormwater pond actually, but might be a couple of lots, is the only area in the whole subdivision that this should apply to. So we'd simply ask that this condition only apply to lots 93 to 96, because those are the lots that your staff think are impacted by that area. And last but not least, and I'm sorry to go on here, but condition 49 puzzles us. Condition 49 says, and it's the last condition. No, it's the second last condition. I'm sorry. The last one, I'm sorry. That the owner shall be, I've got this. Okay, I'm sorry. The owner shall advise in writing how these conditions have been satisfied at least 60 days prior to the final approval of the development. 60 days. So vision this. I come wandering into Pam Dusling's office with a stack of documents and say, there's a copy of my MOE approvals, my Long Point approvals, my approvals from Lee Robinson and her gang, all my approvals. There's the book. Everything to satisfy all these 49 conditions. There it is. Boom. They're saying that I can't start construction for 60 days after that. Don't know why. I know that between the time I hand that package to them and the plan can get registered, there's some legal work that needs to be done, but surely that does not take 60 days. I would respectfully ask that to be 10 days. It's not as if we walk in blindside with our stack and say, there it is, this stuff is coming with the county. We've been dealing with this for years leading up to that stage, but 60 days is problematic, especially if that occurs, let's say in June, and we lose the months of July and August for a construction season, and then we may even lose a housing start season because of 60 days. So, those are my requests. So in summary, we've got a recommendation from approval from all the agencies. It's essential to the developer that we get that condition to reflect that the development will be allowed to proceed so that the first toilet can flush the same day as the plant's commissioned. That is critical from our developer's perspective. Conditions 23 and 35 address that specifically. The design, the approvals of designs, the removals of the holding provisions, all that stuff needs to occur during the construction of the sewage plant upgrades, not after. Otherwise, we're going to lose a couple of years. And your staff has agreed with us on this point. It's just a matter of getting the conditions worded properly to agree with what we've discussed with them. So it's critical to us that we achieve that. There are 8 conditions we've asked to have modified, so we'll hope you'll support us on that. That's it for me. Sorry to be so long-winded, but I'll take your questions if you have any.
Nassan, and thank you very much. Mr. Valley, there'll be some questions, and certainly there will be some direction to staff as far as these 8 conditions you've presented. And thank you for outlining them in that detail. Some work involved there. I'll start with Councillor Black and then Brunton, please.
Luke, thank you very much. Through you to Mr. Valley. John, I don't have, it seems pretty reasonable. I know you're a reasonable guy, so most of them are, but I do have some questions on condition 28. Where then, I can understand why you'd want, or staff might want to access or construction to access Thompson Road, because I know once you start using an existing road, the people living on it don't like it. You get all these trucks going up and down. So where are you suggesting that the access to construction be? Is it Charles?
Charles Street.
It would be Charles.
Yep.
And a lot of trucks going in and out of there. There's a school there, St. Bernard's. Is there any way, or do you have some sort of a plan to mitigate like dust or safety for the kids or existing residents on that street? Is there any way to accommodate them?
Well, that will all, of course, depend on our timing for construction and seasons for construction. In the ideal world, that would occur during the summer months when there is no school on. And like any construction project, there are concerns and requirements for dust control and watering and application of calcium chloride and all those good things that help with that. I guess the big thing that we think Thompson Road is the problem is the sight lines that are problematic there, as well as this issue of we don't want to be hauling all this heavy equipment and everything through a stormwater pond that we've just spent hundreds of thousands of dollars landscaping for you.
No, I agree with you there.
Yeah.
It's just the alternative, I guess which one's better or worse than the other, I guess. Just on number 29, condition 29, this situation sounds very similar to Wyndham Street in Simcoe. Am I right or wrong on that one?
You are right in some regards on that, yes.
Yeah, because I know Public Works, I guess maybe it's a question to ask Public Works on the roads need study, where Washington Street is at, because I know this is what we did with Wyndham. I thought it should have been fixed a long way before, but whatever. So sounds like a similar situation. The rest of them, and the sidewalks, condition 31, what sidewalks are you talking about outside of the development? Like on Charles Street or?
I believe that's the intention of why those words, including connection to existing sidewalk network. Those words, I'm assuming what that means is out on Washington Street, there are sidewalks. I haven't been there to go and look at this since I saw the wording, but I'm assuming they're out there on Washington Street, but not on Charles. So I think what's being asked of us is to build a sidewalk all the way down Charles Street, which is outside of the subdivision.
Okay, I see. The county wants you to redo all of Charles Street, including sidewalks. That's what it sounds like.
That's what it sounds like. Now, if we were to go with this idea of upgrading Charles Street and a cost sharing of 50-50, then the sidewalk can just become part of that.
Okay. All right. Everything else makes sense to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. John, thank you for the workload. Condition 3 makes sense to me, but under condition 23, I'll tell you where I have a few things to question, and I have a few questions, I guess. Under condition 23, I have no problem with that. The concern I have is if we added you can't sell the homes, and I'll tell you why. I don't care if you build the homes, but I don't know if these fellows are going to flip this thing or they're going to sell the lots, and if they sell the lots, somebody's going to put closing dates if they start to build, and that's where we run into a problem. I've seen it before where the future homeowner comes in and complains to the county that I can't get in my house. I've sold my other house, I can't. So if you had an additional clause in there that said that you can build them, but you can't sell them, because it won't be this developer unless he is a home builder, and even if he is the home builder, it's going to be a problem for us, because it's the people that are buying the home. So would that be an inconvenience to add that in there?
Councillor Brunton, I actually think there's a pretty simple solution to that. What we could do is we could say Norfolk County agrees to permit the registration of the final plan of subdivision, the registration of an executed pre-servicing agreement as opposed to subdivision agreement.
There you go.
And that sounds maybe not like a big deal, but what that does, and this used to be the standard way we did subdivisions in Norfolk, is all the servicing went in before the plan was registered. You can't sell a lot until the plan's been registered. Because the plan is what actually divides them into the 100 and whatever 15 lots. So until that plan is registered, it's one big piece of property that the developer owns. The challenge could be in that scenario is getting building permits, but we think we may have an issue with building permits anyway. So perhaps that's something that we could change in here, is change that from a subdivision agreement to a pre-servicing agreement, and delete the part about registering the plan. That would still let the developer get in there, get servicing, and if we could perhaps work with staff to get an increase in the number of model homes that we would build, we could use that to our advantage, and something like that could definitely work. So I think you could do that with relatively minor amendment here.
I'm just concerned that, you know, how builders get closing dates and then all of a sudden the people are screaming because they can't get in. The builder's bad enough if he can't get the project done, but I've had it before and I know it's a problem. Section 29, or condition 29, this 50-50 cost sharing idea, and I'm not sure, I mean, I don't want to say what staff or Lee's looking at there, but have you got a cost on that Charles Street at 50-50?
I don't, and I was realizing that's why I was standing here that someone's going to ask me that question. But I believe we're talking about 120 meters is my guess. If someone's got their calculator handy. 120 meters at, say, $2,000 a meter. So your county's in for, say, 100 and change, and the developer's in for 100 and change.
240 grand?
Yeah.
Okay. The sidewalks, well, we'll go through that again, I'm sure. Source protection 39, I don't have a problem with 35 or 39. Okay, now down here, and you said 2 phases, and so I look at the stormwater pond, and in essence, you don't need the whole pond, I assume, until you get both phases built anyways, right?
The pond would be designed and constructed in the first phase to accommodate the entire plan.
But you don't really need that yet, technically, I would
You don't. You could build a smaller pond and then you could expand it.
Yeah.
But that would be an approvals nightmare, and that would mean 2 rounds with the MOE. And
okay.
So yeah, no, we would do it once.
All right. I'm just. Is that pond like a major minor for the major minor system?
Yes.
And does it do like? And I'm asking, trying to 2-year maintenance on the underground? And flips over onto, or your performance flips over to the 2-year maintenance bond on all your underground?
On the underground service, sanitary sewers, storm sewers, and so on, yes.
Okay, that includes the pond.
The ponds are typically a longer maintenance period than that. Well, sometimes the municipality doesn't want to release them until all the homes are built, so that the developer is charged with cleaning and maintaining and sediment control and those kinds of things.
So that's in the agreement now, the way.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what the new agreement looks like. Your staff is working on new subdivision agreements right now, and we're anxiously waiting to see what terms they have in there.
Because the old agreements are, the stormwater pond's part of the underground.
Correct.
So, and we're not getting into municipal drain like that in subdivision problem we run into.
There is a chance that you could get into a municipal drain because the design for the stormwater goes down Thompson Road and connects to the outlet for the Waterford South Municipal Drain downstream of those ponds, and then uses that outlet to eventually find its way to the Waterford ponds. There may need to be some upgrading there to capacity issues and so on.
So you haven't sorted all that out yet? Then.
We've identified that that's where it's going. We've identified the flows and so on, but there may need to be some upgrade work there done. That'll all be part of final design.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize you weren't that far into it. Okay, my last question, what's the change in the AADT on Charles from now till completed subdivision?
It's a lot more. There's hardly any traffic there now.
No, I know what I think it would be, but I'm just asking you, like, you did a traffic study, so what did you...
They're talking about, say, 100 trips, I read this afternoon, I'm sorry, 100 trips in the morning, and similar in the afternoon, where the traffic now is almost non-existent.
Okay. Okay, so it's not a big burden as far as impact, but the construction, if it all uses Charles, will pretty well put a damper on it. They don't have curbs on Charles now, do they?
I don't believe so.
Right.
No. Lee Robinson is saying no curbs on Charles.
Okay, well, you raised some good, interesting points, and I think staff hopefully can work with it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, John, for your presentation. I guess we're almost having to go through these as we want to comment on them. I guess my first comment, or my first question, relating to condition 23, I for one would support what you're proposing. Is it sort of redundant with the condition 35? Don't they both relate to the same thing in terms of the holding provision and when and under what circumstance it'll be removed? So if the county were to agree to what you're suggesting for condition 23, do we still need 35, I guess?
My interpretation, you can ask your staff, but I think they are a little bit different in that 23 talks about timing of the overall project.
Yes?
And talks about final plan registration, which is what actually puts the plan of subdivision on title and creates the individual conveyable lots, whereas 35 only talks about the holding symbol being removed from the zoning. So we don't have an issue with in 35, there's parts A, B, and C. We don't have any issue with part B and C.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just this small technicality about what does it mean for the Waterford wastewater treatment facility to be completed or addressed. What do those words mean? So we just like to clarify that.
All right, thank you. My second question relates to your issue with number 28. And while I understand what you're saying, it seems to me that you are saying you would agree to have all construction access for phase 1 of your development from Thompson Drive. It's the subsequent phase that you're concerned about bringing equipment and materials across what you would have finished in phase 1. So would you be prepared to have that particular condition changed to say all construction access for phase 1 be from Thompson Road, giving you the flexibility for the final phase and obviously reducing the amount of inconvenience, if you like, for existing residents on Washington and Charles?
It would certainly be our preference to have it deleted. That's our preference. What you've suggested is much better than what the condition reads now, but that's where we're at.
All right. That, to me, that's a reasonable compromise on that one, because I would hate personally to live in a developed subdivision where I've got construction trucks going by and materials and dust, notwithstanding the efforts to reduce all of that impact. It still is an impact for people, and it could go on for a couple of years. If we can cut it in half by changing it, then that's what I hope you'll agree, and I hope staff might agree. 31, with respect to sidewalks, I personally don't think you should be obligated to construct the sidewalks on the rest of Charles, if that's what staff intended there. I would suggest that condition 31 could be modified to say you will be obligated to construct sidewalks on all of the owner's property in accordance with Norfolk County's requirements. So in other words, at the end of your client's property where it joins the rest of Charles, that becomes our responsibility to put sidewalks in there.
Again, I would say that obviously is much better than what we were asking for. Part of the sidewalk issue, from the developer's perspective, it gets a little entangled. Council has certainly seen the constant trail of people coming in here and saying, you know, I've had my house for 5 years and I just found out last week that you're going to put a sidewalk across my front lawn. I won't be able to park my car. You know, you're cutting my lawn in half, all this, and council constantly wrestles with this stuff, constantly. The development community often wonders why we put all these sidewalks in, because quite frankly, it doesn't seem like anybody who lives in subdivisions actually wants sidewalks, but nonetheless, we put them in. The other thing that's really interesting to note here is, and this discussion came up just a few minutes ago about trees. So Councillor Brunton is absolutely correct with, I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but when I started with working with my dad, we put the trees in the boulevard. That's where they went. They went on the county's land, and we put a maple tree, because that's what it was in those days. We put a maple tree on every lot, and Councillor Brunton knows all about this. Then somewhere along the line, the county decided that wasn't a good idea anymore, because the roots were getting wrapped around the gas mains and all this, and we should move those trees onto the private lots. So we've been doing that for the last, 15 years, I'll guess. Now you can see there's this shift coming back to say, no, that we don't like them on the private land because the county can't control them. Put a tree on my lot, I don't want it, I'm going to cut it down. And apparently that happens, apparently. So the county came out with an idea, and they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put them all back on the road allowance, and they can't be within so many meters of the property line. They can't be within so many meters of a hydro pole or a hydro transformer or a fire hydrant or the gas main or the bell line or the sidewalk. And when you took the boulevard and we did this, we actually took a drawing and we started shading in all the no plant zones where you can't plant a tree. If there's a sidewalk on the boulevard, there's no place for the tree. So then the county staff said, well, the solution to that is if you have a sidewalk and therefore you can't have a tree, you should pay the county for the tree, and we'll take the money and we'll plant a tree somewhere else in Norfolk County. Well, you can imagine how the developers felt about that. They're thinking, we are doing this. The whole purpose of this is to have trees along the boulevard to improve the streetscape from their perspective. This is what they want to do. So we said, no, the development community doesn't like this idea. So now you've got what you see before you now, where Councillor Brunton was asking the question about where does this tree go? Well, if there's a sidewalk, there's no room for the tree. So therefore the tree now is on the private property, and you got the challenges that Councillor Brunton is talking about the neighbor who doesn't want it, or cuts it down, or neglects it, or whatever. So the development community again is saying, why are we being forced to put these sidewalks in? No one wants them, everyone complains about them, you guys get constantly harassed about them, now we don't have a place to plant the tree. So why are we building all these sidewalks everywhere? Because I'm not seeing anybody coming in here with delegations saying we need more sidewalks in our subdivisions. Were they? I bet they didn't live in the subdivisions. Anyway, so the whole thing about sidewalks also affects trees and everything else. So it's a long, but at the end of the day, we certainly don't want to be paying for a sidewalk that's outside of our development at the end of the day.
Thank you. Councillor Sonnenberg.
Thank you. Back to this Thompson Road access. You've explained how it doesn't work down here where the pond is and where the bottom of the hill is and the bridge is. I can understand that. Poor sight lines. Has anyone considered building a road from Charles across the top of your property to Thompson? You could do 99% of your construction using that road for trucks and equipment and everything, and then the last minute close that road off and finish your development. Is that anywhere in the realm of possibility?
So just so I'm clear, get this thing going here.
Right
You're
there.
talking about right through here.
Yes.
Problem is, we don't own this land right here. And there's a big ravine that goes through here, which is a natural wooded area, and it's very, let's just say it needs to be protected. So there's a natural feature there that we'd have to fill in, I'm going to guess off the top of my head, a 30-foot deep ravine in there. And it's heavily treed.
Even when you come down that
Well,
notch?
there's a water course that goes right up through here and wraps around and comes up here through the schoolyard and all that kind of stuff. So there would be a constructability issue and a lot of trees to cut down if we did that.
Question answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time? Councillor Brunton?
you, Mayor Luke, for letting me speak again. John, on your drawing there, that little piece of land that isn't in the subdivision, I guess down in the corner, left-hand corner there,
This?
is that outside the urban area? Is that or something, or what's the problem with that?
No, it's in the urban area, and Matt might have to help me a little bit here, but I think the official plan designation for it is not residential. It's commercial, or it's industrial business development or something like that. That doesn't permit residential development. But we understand that through your current official plan review, the proposal will come to you to designate that residential. And when that happens, we can then come back and say, we'd like to now zone it for townhouses, and there'll be an application come forward at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Okay, Mr. Valley, I'm going to let you have a break for a moment, and if you'll have a seat, there may be more, and I will also say that when I'll continue with the procedure that I must follow for public meeting, and when we get to the conclusion, public meeting deal, the recommendation, we will go back to these requests of Mr. Valley and see how we want to deal with those. I will ask again if there is anyone in attendance this evening who wishes to speak in favor of this application. Is there anyone in attendance this evening who wishes to speak in opposition or in general to the application? Yes, if you would come forward, please. Do you want a signature, Andy, for the record, or name? Yes, if you could just clearly give us your name and address for the record, that would be very much appreciated. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Maureen McMeekin.
Maureen McMeekin?
Yes, that's
Thank
correct.
you. And you live?
215 Charles Street.
Thank you very much. You can go ahead.
Okay, my house is the very first house before Street A on the north side. So I will be affected quite a bit, I'd say, by this development. I knew that there was a plan when I purchased my home, and that's fine. I do have some concerns, and a number of people have raised them as well, and they seem to have been dealt with. But I do have a concern with the volume of traffic, especially heavy equipment and that, going up and down the street. Just general disturbance for me. I mean, I can live with that, but it's this elementary school at Washington and Charles Street that bothers me. The amount of traffic that will be coming and going through there, I don't know where the 100 in the morning and 100 in the afternoon came from, because if you're adding that many people, you're probably looking at 2 cars per household. And a lot of people, there's one who stays home through the day. I know I'm in and out up Charles Street probably on average 3 times a day. So I think the traffic volumes are a little higher than what's been calculated, so that is a concern. Okay, sorry, let me get my thoughts collected here. Now, the reconstruction of Charles Street, what are we looking at? Is it a widening or just having the road repaved and put to a level?
So your question is, on Charles Street itself, what will the reconstruction of it look like? Sorry, I'm losing my
That's
voice.
okay.
What will the reconstruction look like?
Yes.
In the size of enlarging or?
Yes.
Lee, I'm not sure, Lee, if you want to respond or planning on what can be expected as far as a reconstructed Charles Street in the finished product.
Through the mayor to council, as we are currently doing road reconstructions, in this particular case, we would be putting in curbs and gutters to address any sort of a drainage issue. It would appear that Charles Street is slightly undersized in the sense of the drivable surface width right now, so that would likely be increased to a local road size. So it would be slightly wider. It would still be contained within the existing right-of-way. We have more than sufficient room on Charles Street to do all of that work in the existing property that the county
So no
owns.
need to have any land acquisition. We would do it within the allowance that's existing there now.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. You may continue.
Okay, and again, this has been raised a few times, but the adding of sidewalks. I understand part of the reason sidewalks can be necessary is if you have someone who's disabled or something like that, I get that. But if the road gets widened and then we put a sidewalk in, I'm going to be within spitting distance of the sidewalk. That just wasn't quite how I wanted to live.
You know why I'm smiling? This council rarely gets a complaint about a sidewalk going in. Especially when people are used to not having a sidewalk,
Yeah.
and then guess what happens? Matt, what's the score on the sidewalk? I assume we'd have a sidewalk on one side of Charles to connect the new development with the sidewalks further to the east or wherever they go?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd defer that question to Lee, please.
Oh, you don't want to answer that?
I'm standing with
Neither do I. Lee is the bravest of us all. Lee, any comment on the sidewalk issue, i.e. Charles?
Through the mayor to council, with respect to the sidewalk issue, at this point it hasn't been determined because this is a draft plan approval of subdivision, so there isn't any kind of detailed design that has been determined for that. So we don't know which side of the road that it would go on. It's obviously something that we would be working with the developer in the community to address the appropriate location. I would like to point out, though, that we have changed the location for our sidewalks in our subdivisions. They are almost immediately behind the curb to maximize the amount of green space between the sidewalk and the house so that people are not, in fact, living on top of a sidewalk. So they are just behind the curb. And we've also worked very diligently with the placement of these sidewalks to ensure that trees are able to be placed in the right-of-way with the placement of the services as well, so that we can actually use all of the available space and still make it all work without having the conflicts that we historically had, or for lack of a better phrase, the bisecting of the driveways that we historically did. So we're well aware of those. We've changed our procedures to ensure that that doesn't continue on an ongoing basis.
Just a side note before I forget. On the public input guide, it says that assessed owners within 120 meters or 400 feet of the subject lands are to be notified.
Yes.
I don't know of anyone but one other person on my street who got this. I only got this because I came here this afternoon and said I needed a copy of it. So I don't know what happened there.
Well, that is mandated under the Planning Act of the province to circulate notice of this public meeting so many days. I'm actually going to get the exact wording from our, more precise wording from our staff. Would you please, to Maureen, talk about the circulation, what took place, what the requirement is?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, you're correct. There is a required circulation, and it depends on distance. I'm not certain why you didn't receive it, but I will look into it. We do have copies of that circulation list and who would have been sent that circulation, so it's something that I can follow up with.
I know one person that got it in the mail, and I certainly wasn't that person.
Yeah.
So, and I don't see anybody, I don't think, else here from Charles Street, and frankly, I think we would have had a bigger turnout. So.
Yeah, that's, I know our staff follow the rules.
Yeah. I'm not trying to lay blame.
No, I don't feel you are at all. You're just pointing out for our sake that you're the closest one, or one of the very closest, and you weren't aware of this meeting and notified in writing.
That's
so
right.
Certainly Matt will look. He does keep a list, our planners, of who were sent notification. So we'll look into that. Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just a couple of small things?
You keep going as long as you like.
Yeah, boy, active audience here. I'll bore you guys all. There is a tree at the base of my driveway, so it would be on city or town property. That's probably about 100 years old, a maple tree. Now, it's to the east side of my driveway, which is where Street A would be going in. I believe the developer is putting that in there. What would happen to that tree? Would that be wiped out with?
I'm not touching that. I bet planning would have an answer.
And is this
let's ask Lee. Lee, are you familiar with this tree? I am not.
I am familiar with the tree, but I would defer the question to Mr. Valley, as he would be the one addressing the designs with respect to where in that piece of property he intends to have the right-of-way come out. It is a fairly large area, and there can be some movement in the road, so I will defer to Mr. Valley to answer that
I
one.
will, at the conclusion, I will have Mr. Valley respond to that if he will, okay?
Thank you.
When I get through all the speakers, thank you.
Thank you. And two other quick things, both housekeeping type things. The area to the east of me that is designated for Street A is a mess. I don't know who at this point might be responsible for cleanup, whether it be the developer or whether it be the town or who, but it just looks awful driving down Charles Street before you get to my place. There's metal snow fences that are all rusted. People have thrown garbage in there, and the grass and weeds are getting to be about this high. It would be kind of nice if somebody could cut it.
Can we make note of that, please? Okay.
And lastly, just raise the concern again for the amount of dust and things like that that will be going on during the construction phase, mainly because my backyard backs right onto where the construction is going, and my side, like my side and my back. And I have a 20 by 40 foot pool there that I don't feel like paying somebody to maintain for me because it's so full of debris most of the time.
I will refer your question to the planning department because we do have some conditions that have to be followed in the way of dust control during construction to protect surrounding neighborhoods. Matt, do you wish to comment on that? It's a good question.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I am aware that there are conditions and rules that they have to follow in order to ensure that there's dust mitigation and that sort of thing through construction.
Mrs. McMeeking, I will just say this for a comment from my position. Over the last couple of years, I have had, I don't want to say several, but I have had some calls concerning dust control in subdivisions in Norfolk County. Mm-hmm. And when I have turned it over to bylaw, Mr. Baird's department, his department has contacted the developer / owner of the subdivision, and I can only assure you that those conditions have been addressed. And rather quickly, we've had some pretty hot, dry summers.
Yes.
And sometimes our developers have to be reminded.
Yes.
But we've had success in getting that addressed.
Yeah, I know it's all sand too, so it looks like
yes, it's very light.
In
yes.
Arabia. But anyway, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Council.
Does council have any questions for Maureen? Maureen, thank you very much, and you brought forward some very good concerns. Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak against or in general to this application? Mr. Valley, do you wish to respond to the questions that Maureen put forward, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, you kind of volunteered me that I would, so here I am. But as far as, traffic goes, as we said at the outset, you know, we've hired a traffic expert. It's gone to the county. Your staff has looked at it. It's been gone to a third-party reviewer. With the upgrades proposed to Charles Street, definitely there will be tons of capacity on Charles Street to accommodate this development. As Lee Robinson said, it connects to Washington, which is even a higher level road. I just don't think there's a traffic congestion issue here, and certainly our traffic, that's based on the report from our traffic consultant. They're the experts, and that's why we hire them, so I have to obviously go along with what they're saying. The tree on the road allowance that was spoken about, Lee's got one up on me because I don't know anything about this tree. The county has the standards for where they want, you know, things centered on road allowances and so on, but if we can flex that a little bit and save a 100-year-old tree, we're all for that, and we'll certainly work with anybody out there and save that tree if it's possible to do so. I heard some comments about the site being messy and dirty. I haven't been out there in a couple of months, but the developer hears that and he'll be out there and get the grass cut and so on, but I don't think there was really anything else on the list. So if there's no other questions, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from council to staff? Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. The Waterford wastewater treatment plant, Is it being built right now?
I'll ask Lee. I know it's close to being started. My guess is later this fall. Lee?
Through the mayor to council, the mayor is correct. It's currently in the design stage, and we will be issuing a tender for it this fall.
When do you expect a completion date?
In the fall of 2018, we expect it to be commissioned. The intention, I believe, as Mr. Valley articulated when we discussed this, was that they would be able to have occupancy or somebody living in the home at the same time that we commissioned the facility in order to not delay the development at all. There's no point in a brand new facility sitting there that's not being used when they can be ready to go at the exact same time that we are.
Have any of our previous wastewater treatment facilities been late?
Through the mayor to council, you'll recall that there is a history with this particular one, and it is currently delayed, which is why we made some changes to the consulting, et cetera, so that we could keep it on track. And this consultant has been working diligently to move it forward, recognizing that we have significant development pressures in the community, and that all development is effectively very minimal until such time as this facility is operational.
So for an example, if the MOE comes back and says we need $4 million additions to these plants and it causes us to be delayed for 3 or 4 months, these toilets aren't getting flushed. So would the county then be liable?
Through the mayor to council, the way that Mr. Valley has proposed the wording for 23 would address that. We have to have those we will have those approvals in place before they would be able to proceed and have the servicing dedicated to them.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you very much. Any other questions? I would like a mover and seconder to close this public meeting. Wells and Brunton have moved and seconded. We now close the public meeting. Those in favor? That is carried. Now, we do have a recommendation from staff. It is for approval. It is on page 63 of your agenda. Having said that, before I get asked to have a mover and seconder for that, if there are, I would like to deal with these proposed conditions that Mr. Valley has, and there are 8 of them there, and I think we've got a pretty good understanding through the discussion and questions, and Mr. Valley certainly has done an excellent job, in my opinion, of laying these out. And my suggestion would be, but I'm looking over at our planning, is that I go through these to get consensus and certainly a comment from you folks as well, because I think we're all in this together. So if I don't get any objections, I'd like to go through these quickly, one at a time. And so I would say to the planning to start, and then I'll certainly ask for any suggestions, comments, or whatever from council, and then we could incorporate what we come up with into the motions subject to these being incorporated. Condition 3 on the 5.5 year. Matt, any thoughts there to the end of 2022?
First of all, thank you very much for letting us comment on John's suggestions. In terms of condition 3, the 3-year time frame is what planning has for our standard draft plan approval. I should remind council that the applicant or developer has the option of coming in to get 1-year extensions if they are getting close to having that 3-year, coming close to that 3-year time frame coming up on them. So that options to extend their draft plan approval is there for them. And like I said, the 3 years are standard, but I think planning staff for this situation will leave that one for council's consideration.
So in other words, are you somewhat in agreement? My thoughts are that under the circumstance with the sewage situation, that in this case maybe a 5-year, you could live with that.
Yeah, it is.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just wondering if that's sort of a good reason to maybe...
It is a unique situation,
Okay.
I will say that.
That's fine. What's your wishes? Councillor Black?
Mayor Luke, now the 3-year period is, they have 3 years to get started. Isn't that right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is 3 years to complete their registration process. So at that point, if they haven't registered all of the subdivision, it would expire unless they come in for the extension.
Okay. Do you foresee any problems that it would take 3 years to get it registered?
Through the mayor, we have talked about some challenges this evening for the Waterford area in particular with sanitary capacity. It could be something that may hold this up. And it is 115 units. It's a fairly sizable subdivision. The applicant wishes to do it in phases.
Okay, thanks.
Those are some
Do you want a
things to
motion or something?
Well, no, I'm going to ask for show of hands on
Okay.
all of these, and then the clerk is going to formulate them into part of the motion. Councillor Wells?
And you are going to deal with
Yes.
each one
Yeah, and I'm going to do this as
collectively
quickly as I can, but I certainly am going to ask for any comments that wish me. I want a show of hands then, if I may, that will support condition 3 as Mr. Valley's requested. Okay, that certainly has support. Condition 23 is, according to Mr. Valley, very, very important. And we know that this relates to adding the word preserving in front of the word pre-servicing. I wrote. Why did I say preserving? Oh, boy. Pre-servicing in front of the word subdivision in the second line. Matt, comments on this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to tackle this in consultation with Public Works and Environmental Services. I'm a little hesitant with some of the wording around the phrase building permits, only because it's not something we can pigeonhole our building division into. So I'm a little concerned about the inclusion of the phrase building permits in that wording. Besides that, I'm comfortable with the rest, but I'd like Lee's input on the rest of that wording as well.
Through the mayor to council, Public Works has no objections to the wording as specified on the piece of paper. We had many consultations back and forth, and Public Works had reviewed this wording and didn't have any objections to this wording. The term pre-servicing was new this evening. I hadn't heard it before today. And I'm a little, I believe that the wording that's been put forward on the piece of paper in front of you for condition 23 is sufficient to allow us some negotiations or some ways of working forward to do that. Concerned if we put in the word pre-servicing that we're going to limit staff's ability to make this work. I think that everybody here is well aware of what council's intentions are and that we want to do everything in our power to expeditiously move this development forward so that once the Waterford facility for wastewater is fully constructed and operational, that people will be able to move into new homes. And I do believe that the wording as originally proposed by Mr. Valley in condition 23 will address that.
You're pleased with the wording, I shouldn't say pleased, you're okay with the wording without the word pre-servicing added in.
That is correct.
Council, your thoughts? Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate what Lee has said. I understand where Matt was coming on the building permit thing, but it seems to me the issuance of a building permit has nothing to do with allowing people to live in that house and start flushing toilets. That's the occupancy permit. So I understand why he requested it the way he did, and I don't think that compromises our building department at all. So I would support the way it is worded in that clause.
Okay, Councillor Brunton, then
Unless Lee
Height.
is going to disagree with me on something.
Well, I'm just a little bit confused, Mayor Luke. I want to make sure, and again, I don't know these gentlemen, if they're developers, home builders, or what they are, but lots of times, a developer ends up selling the lots, and then they get commitments for people to buy the house, and they have closing dates, and that becomes a problem. I just want to make sure that, I don't have any problem with the clause the way it's written, but we may have a problem when people start knocking on our door and say, listen, I bought this house to close on a certain date, because the builder told him he could close it, then he finds out he can't flush his toilets. Do you understand that?
I will respond and say yes. However, having said that, I know that it is not my or our problem here when developers promise a closing date that they can't, because of conditions in the agreement cannot fulfill. And we see that happen over and over, but if you're going to complain to me, you're talking to the wrong person. Because,
I've had it happen, that's why.
well, we have had it happen. You're right, I don't disagree. But I don't know how we can prevent the developer from doing that. Making a promise that you'll be in by the end of December, when in fact, there's no water or sewage available. So it's not turned on.
All right.
You can't get an occupancy. Let's see, I think that was Councillor Height? Oh, yes, I have you up here. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I guess I have a bit of an issue with this one. How much capacity is left in Waterford? I thought we were down to bare bones minimum as far as home building expansion without a new facility.
There's 0 left to currently allocate.
Exactly, and the new facility is going to cost somewhere around 15 million to 18 million. Would that be fair?
On the lower side of that scale, the design we're working on actually should save us some money, and we're hoping that we can bring this one in under 10 million.
And how much? 10?
We're hoping to bring it in under 10 million.
10 million, and you're going to have that done in a year and a couple months.
That is correct. This is not the Waterford system is currently a lagoon system. And as such, the work that we're doing to this is actually a pre-packaged type of facility. So it's not similar to any of our other sewage treatment facilities in this municipality.
Yes.
So it's a much faster construction period as a result of the type of system we're installing.
Thank you for that. I do remember Bob Field saying this was a state-of-the-art, special, unique one to the Midwest U.S. And I'm not sure that I'm going to stick my neck out on this clause, because unless our county solicitor can answer whether there's a hold harmless clause in case this thing has a delay of 3 months and this developer has 40 houses built that he can't issue occupancy permits for and we get sued. So I'd like to ask our county solicitor.
I'll let him respond, and then I also have an opinion, and it probably isn't as good as his. Do you wish to respond to this or not?
I don't have the information necessary to give you a response.
I guess my response, if I may, knowing how many times I get phone calls from developers saying, come on, we got to get going. We've got people want to move in. We got people that want their homes built. That's the story I get. I think with this condition, I kind of like it. I think when Mr. Valley or the developer calls me 2 years hence and says, come on, well, this was your idea, condition 23. You know full well that we don't have a D-Day of 12 months or 15 months. We usually have a record of being on time with our sewage treatment plants. So I think in some way this says you went ahead with your development knowing full well that nobody's going to purchase and move into a home until we are done. I see Mr. Valley would like to comment. Could I ask permission just for him to respond to that? He's probably going to tell me that I'm out to lunch on this one, but I see it as protection for us. Mr. Valley?
I think you're absolutely right, Mayor Luke, and I think what council has got to keep in mind here, we're talking about the wording of a draft plan condition, which will ultimately find its way into the actual agreement, the legal agreement that's registered on title between the county and the developer, which your solicitor no doubt will have an opportunity to review in great detail and make sure that the county is protected. But I think what's key here is we're agreeing you're going to do all these things for the developer and let them go charging ahead, but we also understand all the things you've just been talking about, and that legal agreement which sets out the conditions will be vetted by your legal department, and that can be addressed at that time. I think we're getting a little too much into worrying about being sued. Let's leave that for the actual agreement that gets crafted, and that's probably a year down the road.
Can I have a show of hands if you're ready to support condition 23 as printed by Mr. Valley? Okay, and we will go with that. And Mr. Valley, you'll want to hope that Lee Robinson doesn't take a job in Kitchener. In the meantime, condition 28, Mr. Valley has suggested that the phrase all construction access from Thompson Road be deleted. And we certainly talked about the possibility of one phase coming in from the south and then the second part or thereabouts from Charles. Any comments on this? Councillor Oliver, your thoughts?
Mr. Mayor, I'm sympathetic to Mr. Valley and his clients on this, but not to the point of deleting this condition completely. I would like to modify condition 28 to say all construction for phase 1 of the development would be from Thompson Road. In other words, the subsequent phase, which will be further to the north, would be the one where he would be able to use, presumably, Washington and Charles Street to access that final phase of their development. At least it would eliminate the problem for folks in that developed part of town if they're forced to come in from Thompson for the first phase of their development, but not all.
Mr. Oliver is suggesting that for phase, all construction for phase 1 come in from Thompson Road. Any discussion on this, Councillor Brunton?
Well, I support the idea, but I would certainly like to hear from John if he thinks he can handle that. If that's going to be a nightmare for them. The only way I see that happening is if he takes one of those lots on the cul-de-sac and shuts it down until they build. Can you do that?
Okay, well, just hold on a second. John, you stay seated for a moment. I'm going to get to Mr. Valley. Staff, Matt, I forgot. I wanted to start with you and my apologies. Comments on Mr. Valley's request for condition 28?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to defer that one to Lee.
Through the mayor to council, the reason staff had requested this be included is for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons being is that if the intention is to have that Charles Street needs to be reconstructed from one end to the other in order to accommodate this development, there's likely, still to be determined, but there's likely water main or sanitary sewer upgrades that need to be done underneath Charles Street. As such, Charles Street needs to, if we're digging up Charles Street to redo the sewers and the water main, it should be reconstructed at that time, as we're already doing construction and there's some considerable cost savings associated with doing all the work at the same time. If the work on Charles Street is being undertaken at the same time that the subdivision is being developed, we have a considerable conflict of interest between contractors, people, everybody trying to get everywhere. We've closed their access to the site. The developer isn't able to get to the site if there's no access from Thompson Road, because Charles Street will be under construction. And it's okay to maintain, a single vehicular access for the people and the businesses that live there. But to have a constant stream of construction traffic going through a construction area, that will be very, very difficult. That's one of the reasons that we had sought to have the construction access off of Thompson.
So you're telling us, or at least I think I'm hearing for the first time, that in order to do servicing of this subdivision, they'll have to come in from Charles Street?
They have to do some servicing work on Charles Street as a result of this development.
But is servicing going into the subdivision through Charles?
It's going through Charles,
Okay.
and the existing services on Charles are undersized to support a development of this size. So they
Sure.
have to be upgraded. So it's going to be very tricky to stage the construction of Charles Street if they're trying to do some construction work in the development, even if they did all of the servicing in the development and then did Charles Street last. If they're then able to construct homes in phase 1, they can't get all of that construction traffic, like the concrete trucks and all of that, down Charles Street if Charles Street is under construction.
I don't mean to dominate, but I want to ask you this question. If somebody has suggested maybe a smaller pond and enlarge it later, is it possible to have a temporary entrance in and out of Thompson Road, and also have a retention pond that'll, let's say, accommodate phase 1, so that down the road it could be, like, I don't understand about the phasing or enlarging of the pond. Do you want to comment on that?
From our review, we believe that, and we haven't seen the detailed stormwater management design yet, because we're obviously not at that point of the development. We're just a draft plan, so everything is sort of conceptual. staff believe that there's sufficient room that they would be able to basically do a construction access along the edge of the pond, that after that access was closed, they could finish the landscape in that area at that point. Again, the reason that we included this condition was more out of consideration for the development and their ability to actively and properly do a construction, to construct it. Was we were very adamant that we didn't want a permanent access off of Thompson Road.